Yes, thank you, Ingrid. She said, I was a firefighter, and this story revolves around them. The opening takes place at the funeral of a retired firefighter, one who has committed suicide. My central character, a retired firefighter named Elmer, tries to make sense of the tragedy and ends up questioning his own existence. The scene I'm going to read from has Elmer telling other firefighters what it was like to work with the man whose funeral they're gathered at. I remember when East Coast Chemical shot up, I say. He was a rookie lieutenant, just appointed, and a few years before he made captain. I was still on tailboard, studying to take the engineer's test. How long ago was that? Oscar says. About 20 years. We were in the middle of breakfast, griddle cakes and coffee, when we got the call. From the station, you could see thick smoke tumbling across the sky. You guys rode a three-man crew in those days, didn't you? Tabor says. Yeah, I was on tailboard. Big Ron Yerby was the engineer. And like I said, he was a rookie lieutenant. We slipped on our bunker gear, and I jumped on the tailboard of old Engine 4, the American La France. Yerby, who had a hot foot, charged out of station, sirens screeching all the way to the warehouse district. We don't ride the tailboard anymore, Oscar says. Lowy opens his hand toward Oscar as a signal to not interrupt, so I continued. It was worse than I thought. Being Sunday, you know how it is there. Nothing but buildings, rats, and chain-link fences. It had all night to flare up. The heat smacked hard on my ears and cheeks. I lowered my visor and raised my collar. East Coast Chem was an old boxy thing, about 3/4 the size of a football field, with a pair of large overhead doors. Overgrown stinkweed separated the warehouse from its neighbors. CBS, Tabor says. Yeah, with a concrete roof, I say. The structure ripped and snorted like it had whooping cough, and the smell, Jesus. Even after I tightened my self-contained, that charred plastic stink curdled my nostrils and pores for the next few days. Occasionally, a blast like an M80 blew from inside. I'll tell you, fellas, it was a barn burner. You were the only unit on the scene, Louis says? At first. Like I said, he was a rookie lieutenant, so I expected he'd have the heebie-jeebies big time. As he hopped out of the cab, I corner-eyed him, watching him size up the situation. I lowered my head to watch my loafers, but really to watch the burning building in my mind. Then what? Oscar says. I look back up. He ordered a reverse double lay with a hard suction hookup at the hydrant, which was about a half block away. He and I pulled the skids from the hose bed and then the deluge, and damn near everything else our gloved hands could grab. By this time, the walls were blistering and the heat had singed the stinkweed. Your adrenaline must have been kicking, Tabor says, like a mule after a bee sting. I hopped back on the tailboard and signaled Yerby, the engineer, to take off for the hookup. The lieutenant stayed behind. The pumper rolled and the hose snaked out of the bed. We connected to the hydrant, but there was a problem. The water flow, right, Louis says? The city keeps jerking us around with that. No. After we hooked up, I heard a long, low grumbling, and then a boom! I looked back fast and caught the roof ripping from the walls, a perfect pancake. A giant blue firestorm where the ceiling used to be. My throat caught and I nearly vomited my breakfast cakes. I headed back to the fire in double time, frankly afraid of what I'd find. I glanced at the fellas. They're nodding their heads as if remembering. I doubt if any of them have ever experienced anything like that. You can train, you can study, you can practice, but in that split second when there's no thinking, no rationalization, no sarcasm, humor, bullying, bluffing, or ego, it all comes down to character. The weaker ones fall back and protect the exposures. The stronger ones step forward and wrestle the fire demon. I don't know how to convey that to the fellas, or even if I have to. So I say, damned if that rookie lieutenant hadn't pried open both overhead doors, had the deluge connected, and shooting 500 gallons per minute over the breached roof, and was signaling me to help him drag the 3-inch hose into the darkest, most solid smoke wall I ever saw in my life. He was a good man, a good guy to share sweat with. My skin prickles. It surprises me the jump I get from telling that story. So I have the honor of introducing David Beatty. And David's lived and worked in Greece, England, and Brazil. He's a graduate of Columbia College. He earned an MSA in creative writing from FIU, where he was recipient of the Josephine Friedman Award for Fiction. His stories have appeared in Miami Noir, Unbound Press, Having a Wonderful Time, Tiger Tale, and other anthologies and literary journals. His short story Ghosts was chosen for the Best American Mystery Stories of 2000, and his story, The Last of Lord Jitters, received honorable mention in the Best American Mystery Stories of 2007. And on a personal note, let me say that David, the writing is of probably of the richest writing I've read from a lot of people. If you, I'm telling you, get a chance to read his stuff, it's amazing. David?